God bless. This is NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFL Extended Strategic Principles, found on the web at NFL-ESP.com. I am your host, Mark Anthony DeBello, the creator and master strategist behind NFL ESP, and you can find more information on me on my website, markanthonydebello.com, and you may also click on the Sports tab to find more about this program and this unique system. This program is going to be 30 minutes long. Going to break it up into 3 definitive segments, cover the games from an NFL ESP perspective, especially including a number we call the power spread, and then how that power spread relates to a similar number that's disseminated throughout Nevada for those who are interested in investing in games, or the B or G word, which we don't like to use because we believe in the integrity of the games, but we also believe that the analytics and statistics and data that come out of Nevada is more accurate, more productive, and we're able to be more predictive with regards to using that information for coaches when they make their basic strategy decisions, and that's where production comes in as a part of NFL ESP. And as one who lives here in Sin City, but just spent a beautiful 6 days watching Pope Francis visit the United States, and we've always professed that math is a language of God's, which it is, been able to be blessed to be very prophetic when it comes to information about the NFL. So again, we basically try to focus on the 3 P's: prophecy, prediction, and then as it relates to NFL teams and the use of the power spread in making strategy decisions, production, which we've been proven to increase in NFL teams by 10 to 15% over the course of a season, regular season. So that's between basically 2 and 3 wins per season, and even more so if your team makes it into the playoffs. And in NCAA ESP, which is a branch, our college branch, we've been proven to increase a team's win production by 25 to 30%. So the goal of this program, NFL Moneyball, again found at NFL-ESP.com, is to get a wider audience. Our predictions, usually the final phase of making predictions is after week 2, but I've been behind this season and now am fortunate enough to have reviewed a lot of tape in week 3, and one of my data programs and statistical research models has finally been done. It wasn't done up until just today, actually, which is Monday, the 28th, and the NFL Monday night game just concluded with Green Bay beating Kansas City. So anyway, having said that, and giving you a little bit of background on NFL ESP, we're looking for a wider audience, one who wishes to hear the truth and the accuracy, and then finds the value in knowing this data and this system that's developed around 4 basic categories. We focus on the spiritual and motivational, X's and O's, which is typically play design, and then the strategic, with again our exclusive use of the power spread. Now, how that relates in a lot of ways, since this is a media program, one of the ways in particular is to be able to prognosticate and predict and make more productive the scheduling of games, especially the Monday night game, which I just referenced on ESPN, by giving better matchups with teams that have better playoff possibilities, including their popularity, and games that we predict will be closer and typically higher scoring, which typically makes a better game, and the home team winning, which is of better entertainment value, if you will, to the audience. They would rather hear the applause and see the home team win. So what we try to guard against is bad matchups with low record teams late in the season that are meaningless and that are blowouts. And that is incredibly valuable, I believe, monetarily to a network like ESPN, and even on the Sunday night games on NBC. So there's a lot of value to NFL ESP beyond the aforementioned. So that's an introduction to the program. We've got 25 minutes remaining, and I say we. I'm not afraid to, or lacking boldness to confess it's God and I think you'll see that when you do go to the blog, which is at nfl-esp.com, or you can actually go to sportsblog.com and type in my name, Mark Anthony DeBello. We've been a little off this season to start, but again, we're not going to change after this week, and I don't need to, especially the power ratings, which you'll see there, and the rankings of how the media predicts games. I could include more erroneous and media, but I just don't want to have to research them because I don't like listening to them, because they just profess a lot of what they call expertise, or being an expert, and couldn't make predictions more inaccurately. So, but having said that, we also rank the quarterbacks in a unique value system, and then the teams. So I've made my final adjustments, and I'll go over them quickly here on the blog before recapping last week, getting to this week's games, more so from an NFL ESP perspective, then quickly going over the Las Vegas perspective, what might be interest to those who follow that sort of data. And again, we believe in the integrity of the games and that people shouldn't BET on games, but that information and that data should be used to help teams be more productive on the field of play. And then lastly, I'll give, as I promised the last couple weeks, more time devote to fantasy, but I don't want to give away too much, as I'm this season actually really starting to focus more on actually playing fantasy myself, since the NFL seems to endorse that. But it's really no less than the G word. They just found a caveat and a way to make it legal, although now Las Vegas has passed a rule, and not that I'm ever breaking the rule of disseminating the information, because that's when it's done for wagering purposes. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about using the data to make the most productive basic strategy decisions. Tragically, and much of what I've prophesied over the last 10 or 15 years when I finally refined the system scares the NFL. As, for example, 15 years ago, I was projecting that teams should be doing two-point conversions. It's the most productive play on the field. Now, how would you like to admit a team that mastered that 15 years ago, when it's so much more come into play now, and more of use, and more attempts made at the two-point conversion? So, again, what I think the NFL fears is they don't have the vision to realize what this data has been, and they're especially afraid of the G word. And the BET word, and I can respect that and understand it, but again, it doesn't mean that the data isn't valuable. It's actually the most underused, misunderstood data in all of professional sports, especially pro football, and it's definitely the most productive. So, having said that, that's why I'll give, although I'm not officially hired this year by a team, but did do some consulting the last couple of years with a team, but they went in the opposite direction of what we had reported and said to them, and then actually didn't include me, which I had said 15 years ago would be the position of a game management coordinator, or GMC, a third coordinator in the booth who through a headset relays at about 10 points of call during the game the most productive basic strategy decisions to a head coach. Last season, I lay all this out for the Bears and Coach Mark Trestman, but they went with a different analytics person, the GM, and you saw what happened to the Bears, and you saw what happened to Coach Trestman, although he's been a long-time friend of mine and was my coach in college. So, anyway, as we near the 10-minute mark, let me just break down the notes here on the that I wrote for the season. The AFC East is the most powerful division in football. It'll be Buffalo or New England making the playoffs. You can see the Jets doing better than people thought, and Miami will come around, although they got to a slow start. And again, I'm not going to comment or change that information on there, not only for time constraints, but I like to stay loyal to that. It troubles me really when the media people, they'll change their power rankings and they'll change their predictions right up until week 15 or 16. The goal is to have foresight, to see ahead. That is what helps to make somebody in a team more productive. In the AFC North, this is a really close division, probably the second-ranked division. Cincy, I rated Cincy, Baltimore, who's been letting us down. I'm not going to put it on Coach Trestman, certainly, but I think they'll come back around Baltimore. Pittsburgh is actually, I think, going to do okay with Mike Vick in there, but we did project them to come third. But again, that could, any order in that division could change, and especially Cleveland if they were to use Manziel properly, and they haven't, and they probably won't, as I noted previously, and you can just saw that last week in the Oakland loss. Tennessee would normally be our wild card team, and I think they actually could get there. Indy, as bad as they are this year to start, should win that division. Houston and Jacksonville are bad teams. You'll see that in Houston. Denver's a good team, but I know they're not going to be a Super Bowl team. I don't believe, even though the change to the head coach, I think, could put them over the top. But again, there's just something about Denver. I know they're a little overrated. Then Kansas City, clearly ahead of San Diego and Oakland. And Kansas City could get it that wild card, even though they did lose Monday night here to Green Bay. NFC East, I prophesied early, predicted Dallas to win the division at 7-9. That's going to look accurate. The rest of those teams are all poor teams, especially the overrated Eagles and Giants, and you'll see that. NFC North, Green Bay. I have to give credit to Minnesota. I was a little bit scared of this pick because that was a media pick, but they do actually have a good defense. I think Bridgewater's overrated. Adrian Peterson obviously can play. Detroit's not doing well to start. I think they'll start picking it up. I don't know what's wrong with Matthew Stafford in the offense, but the big problem is their defense. I don't know if it was losing Sue or what happened, but defense does win championships, and that's, for the most part, a couple of reasons. But one is the better athletes are on defense, and two is your defense can score, unlike your offense, who's not really designed to defend. Defenses do both. They defend and they can score, and that's why defenses in every sport have won championships since the beginning of time, basically. The NFC South, this is a really close division. I'm going to stick with New Orleans. They're off to a bad start, but only because I know they had a bad turnover ratio last year. I think they can change that, but they're all mediocre teams. New Orleans, Carolina, Atlanta. I always liked Carolina. I liked them last year, but they're beginning to break their defense. They had a great defense. They still do, but the offense isn't picking up the steam. If Cam doesn't do, and he's a great quarterback, Cam Newton, but with Benjamin missing, nonetheless, I know Atlanta's improving, but overrated, and Tampa Bay is just too volatile with Winston at quarterback. He just throws a lot of dangerous passes. He's going to throw a lot of interceptions or a lot of touchdowns, probably a lot of both by the time his career is over, but more interceptions. The NFC West, Arizona, I believe, is the best team in the NFC, followed by Seattle. St. Louis needs a quarterback better than Foles, although he's definitely improve over Bradford, and San Fran's not as bad as everybody thought. But again, Arizona and Seattle are clearly the best teams there. I really project it down to, and I have just some problems because I can't see New England or an AFC team, and then New England repeating, but the AFC is probably a little bit more powerful than the NFC by about 3 or 4 points. Arizona, I don't see any team in the NFC better than Arizona, Green Bay, and Seattle. That's an obvious. I'll put them in the 95 percentile, top tier of the NFC. But all the other teams ranked in the power ranking top 10 are all AFC teams. So again, it's unlike me not to have a clear Super Bowl prediction as I did last year when I said clearly in July it would be Seattle against Arizona in a 50-50 game. Then anyway, so we shall see. But I do believe Arizona will be in that Super Bowl. Again, God forbid should Carson Palmer, who has always been underrated, I think, by people, get hurt. But again, we've looked at the top power rankings there. I listed the quarterback power rankings as well, and it's always a surprise to people that Johnny Manziel is on there. But I think he's going to be in Aaron Rodgers. I told this to a Cleveland radio network. They mocked me, laughed at me, hung up on me basically, which is absurd. Because I compared him to Aaron Rodgers. Well, I said Aaron Rodgers would be Aaron Rodgers when he was in college and came out as the 26th or something draft pick. Now, how do I look on that prediction? God bless. Especially in his last 2 years or whatever the time frame was, I said Favre should be out of there and get the pack could get maximum value for Favre and get Rodgers in the lineup sooner. And that, God bless, prognostication or insight was, I think, in retrospect, highly accurate. So, anyway, we're about halfway through the program. Let me go through last week and through this week, sort of a combination of both from a little bit of a Vegas perspective in regards to the power ranking, but more so from an NFL ESP perspective. Steelers are playing the Ravens. I actually think Vic can adapt the way they used to adapt Cordell Stewart. Here, the Ravens, I mentioned Joe Flacco's too linear. He needs to be more mobile. That's where most of your production comes from. It's on the third down scrambles of the quarterback, especially on a broken play. And you can basically rate the production of every team based on QB time in the pocket. If you are a traditional drop-back team, of which only one would be the best, versus the more improv guys who are more highly power-rated. And I think Mike Vick can do pretty well on third down, scrambling the way Ben did Roethlisberger in the pocket. But the Ravens, God bless them, need to get Joe Flacco out on the edge more. And we know this is a quarterback-centric league. That's where my background. I started out playing quarterback before I went to the U and played receiver there. And could throw the ball 50 yards in 8th grade and hit a dime. So, I mean, I've always studied the game more as a, cerebrally, which, is more so in the position of quarterback than a wide receiver. So, that's, just moving forward. Let's get to the Sunday games. The Jets are playing the Dolphins in London. The Jets are definitely a better team than the Dolphins, although they play these teams, each other close. The Jets' weakness is at the quarterback position, although Fitzpatrick is definitely dynamically better than Geno Smith, who is one of our lowest power-rated quarterbacks in the last 15 years. So for the Jets, the defense, Tannehill needs to run. He's a highly intelligent, I believe, quarterback. He used to play wide receiver. If he could put himself more in the Marietta Manziel model, they would do much, much better instead of just focusing on making him be, a traditional drop-back passer. So that's what the Dolphins really need to do there. And again, I don't want to say too much because again, I'm not of hire, and I'm more or less, I have an expression, I'm just tired of giving away things for free that are priceless. People underestimate them, they undervalue them, and I mean, I hear coaches say, get great credit for making two, and I respect all of them, believe me, they're head coaches, but they all are making, $2 million or plus a year, and told they have to do these great things with their teams, and yet 31 of them fail, okay? And really, by NFL ESP data rankings, there's only 4 or 5 that actually produce to the level that they should produce. And I just met with Coach Parcells over the summer, and his 3 disciples, Belichick, Coughlin, and Peyton, are actually producing pretty well. Then I threw in Coach McCarthy and another 4th head coach right now I can't think of off the top of my head, but basically those who most use the power spread like data that they see coming out of Las Vegas, which is inaccurate actually, that's been skewed so that people who bet on BET, I hate to use that word, but people who BET on games, so they'll lose. The house there is in the business of winning. So to look at the power spread is the accurate data. Las Vegas gets their number from us. My partner used to run, one of my business partners used to be CEO of the largest data producing company in all of Las Vegas, and that company disseminates the information to all the casinos. into all the sports books. But again, they skew it. Now, you can find more information on this on the website, but what you want to use is the accurate power spread data. But it is so powerful and so effective that even coaches, and I mentioned those coaches earlier, who are using the data, maybe just looking in a newspaper, perform and produce better. I also want to make another note with regards to something I predicted in NFL ESP. It's the value of home field advantage. We noted that it used to be traditionally, and this is how they rated it at the, coming out of my business partner's company, they used to rate it 3 points, but now it rates as high as 4 to 7 points, and it's at an all-time high. In all the years I've been studying football, which is 45 years, it was noted on the Monday night game that this season the most penalties called in the first 3 weeks since the merger, and that's because of home field advantage. That's what home field advantage is. It's biased officiating calls, not just the gross amount of penalties or the yardage, but the timeliness of those penalties. And again, a lot of that equates to crowd noise and whatnot, but Green Bay gets a distinct home field advantage of 7 points, and they got it tonight against Kansas City. I mean, just calls where the refs will throw a flag, many seconds after a play. I mean, there's a lot of psychology to it, but I'll tell you, one team that's failing on it is the Ravens. They're not getting the home field they should have, and I predicted this at the beginning of the year. It had a lot to do. It sounds sort of eccentric, but it's not. Believe me, I have guaranteed data to prove it. But they should have done more with the riots at the beginning of the year. Anyway, let's go through the rest of this schedule so I don't run out of time. Jacksonville's playing Indy. They're a definitive 9-point underdog here. They're probably only about 7 points to Indy. So that means they need to make more aggressive basic strategy decisions, especially on offense. And they need to slow the game down. Indy is a high-powered offense. So Jacksonville needs to, just try to run less plays in that game to overcome that number. Atlanta and Houston, these teams are actually almost equal. Atlanta's giving 6 points, so if you were to invest, and I'll get to this part of the program in a little bit here, you would want to take Houston, but Atlanta is overrated. They're playing, I think they just played all NFC East teams, so that's a relatively even game. But I do like Atlanta, and I do think they've improved. Carolina's playing Tampa. Again, I'm been against Jameis Winston, but Carolina is overrated with regards to the power spread. And if you're giving 3.5 points down in Tampa this year with Winston could get a higher home field advantage, and that means, in a sense, you're thinking or saying that Carolina is about 7 points better than Tampa Bay. They're not 7 points better than Tampa Bay, as poor as Tampa Bay is. So if Tampa Bay can get some home calls and just Winston not have turnovers, which every coach will tell you turnovers are the entire game, but he throws a lot of dangerously close passes. If they concentrate on defense and running, I think they can actually beat Carolina, and they should. Buffalo is clearly definitively better than the Giants. Manning is a lot like Winston. He throws a lot of risky passes. Sometimes he's fortunate and they hit, and that's how they won Super Bowls, is big power spread underdogs, or at least that one Super Bowl. I don't know. Did they win two? I think maybe the Giants. But anyway, so that's what the Giants need to do. Buffalo just needs to play, a tight game, defensive game. They're actually doing much better offensively this year. But Buffalo's clearly cut the better team favorite. So from an NFL ESP perspective, you don't want to take chances. You want to be conservative is the word we use. Giants need to be aggressive. Chicago, I was never big a fan of the backup, Jimmy Clausen, although I know Chicago from having worked with them a lot last year and consulted. Oakland is on the improve. So Chicago, I see he only threw about 14 or 15 passes last week. I think they realized that he shouldn't be throwing a lot, especially against Seattle, who they played last week, the Bears. So the best thing the Bears can possibly do is slow that game down. Oakland looks like they like to throw to Cooper a lot. I'm just giving you some tempo of the games. I gave you this, information tempo last week. I don't want to just focus on that. There are other aspects. For instance, let's get now to the Eagles and Washington game. Eagles won because of turnovers against the Jets. If you do the data on the turnovers, that's the reason the Eagles won last week. Just the same reason the Jets had won the week before. they had against Indianapolis. I think they got a lot of turnovers. So Philadelphia is a very low power ranked team. As bad as Washington is, I think Washington will, can very well win this game, should win this game. Actually, again, Philly is overrated. The other thing I wanted to note there, with regards to Philly, as I mentioned last week, was the tempo of slowing the game down. I'm going to have to rush this. I'm sorry if I don't get the fantasy again, and kind of thrown in Las Vegas in this as well. I'll come back to it. I just lost my train of thought here. I don't know what the power spread is on Cincinnati. They're a home team, and I know they get a lot of home calls in Cincinnati, so they should beat Kansas City, but that's actually an evenly ranked game. San Diego is a big 10-point power spread over Cleveland. Cleveland, again, if they go with McCown, they can't overcome that 10-point power spread. Only Manziel can do that. That's why he needs to be in the lineup. He's the best. He'll be one of the best improv third-down quarterbacks in the league. Green Bay's going to play San Francisco. The power spread early coming out on that, they're listing their spread in Las Vegas as 9. It's not actually that high, and I think actually San Fran could upset that game, just the way they upset Minnesota in Week 1. That should be a lower scoring game. I think San Francisco definitely needs to take some chances. They have a good mobile quarterback in Kaepernick, but they need to be aggressive in that game and take chances there. Denver gets a tremendous home field advantage for multiple reasons, but Minnesota's actually a pretty good defensive team. I think that game's going to be closer than people think. Denver's listed as a 7-point power spread favorite, but what you need to do is you need to do something with Bridgewater. You need to get him mobile on third downs. You can't just trust him to be a pocket passer, especially, against Denver. Again, that's where most of your production comes from, your quarterbacks. Arizona, who has a traditional drop-back quarterback, and I think the best one by far in the NFC, if not the entire NFL. Well, let's give all respect to Brady and Manning and how power ranked high New England and Denver are. But Arizona is definitely a better team than St. Louis, although I think that will be a closer game this week if you're interested from a Las Vegas perspective. But Arizona's been going through the number, which means that regardless of what the power spread is, Arizona is winning by more, and that's a really good sign. You want to see that. Again, I have Arizona clearly, and this is, again, probably their biggest test so far of the season, I would think. I don't have their previous games right in front of me, but they're a very good power spread ranked team. New Orleans is playing Dallas with Breeze back. I think New Orleans, in this case, especially with Whedon at the quarterback for the Cowboys, want to run a lot of plays. NFC again is a very weak. NFC East is a very weak power spread division. And I think New Orleans has been underrated with turnovers, so I wouldn't be surprised. Last year they lost a lot of games to turnovers. I wouldn't be surprised if New Orleans got a lot of turnovers in this game. And then the last game is Seattle against, and I'm going to leave a couple minutes here for fantasy, Seattle against Detroit. If you're Seattle, they're giving 9 or 10 points. Detroit has got to get out of this funk that they're in, but again, especially playing a better team, which Seattle is clearly the highly ranked power ranked team. You want to slow the game down if you're Detroit. You want to do things like take a chance, fake punt. You see a lot of teams catch up in games because they're going for it on fourth down. The key to going for it on fourth down is or even an onside kick, is not going later in the game when you realize you need it. It's doing it earlier in the game when your probabilities are increased, when the power spread data indicates you're going to need to do it. For instance, Kansas City caught up in the Green Bay game on Monday night because they converted a couple of fourth downs. Well, going into that game, they were a 7-point power spread underdog. They should have been going for fourth downs earlier in the game. I know they're going to need to do it later in the game. It's just a matter of the numbers being accurate, and they are. So, having said that, that covers this season from sort of the NFL, ESP, and Las Vegas perspective. It's going to give me a minute to cover fantasy, because I know you guys out there like to do the fantasy. With fantasy, you want to look at teams who are power spread underdogs, okay, who will end up winning their games and going through the number or keeping the game close. The two real good power spread teams we had, players I had last week, were Randall and Jamal Charles at Kansas City. You don't want to go with two good teams facing each other because it's typically they're going to be good on defense. Closer games are usually more low scoring. You want, the higher or bigger the margin in a game, the more scoring. So you kind of want games that are going to be obvious blowouts. You want to take away. You kind of want to avoid, maybe a team like the Chargers this week who are the biggest power spread favorite, or Seattle. Everybody knows that. Or even Indianapolis are all close to double-digit power spread favorites. You kind of want to stay away from that. Anyway, there's a few points of fantasy. I've got to wrap it up here. I don't want to, again, give you too much in fantasy because I'm competing against you guys this year. So I don't know how many people are going to listen to this program. I can only be prayerful. More people, the whole world listens, to be honest. I just want to share the wealth and knowledge that God gave me freely and to give to others. I would like to, however, profit in some way, whether it's just through having a voice, which is my main goal, or even financially, which I can do on my own, basically. But, again, God bless everybody. Appreciate you all listening. This has been NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFLESP.com, and I am your host, Mark Anthony DeBello. Thank you, and God bless.